Good morning, church. So my name is Mike, and I'm one of the ministers here. I get the joy of serving our youth, and I'm also a part of the upcoming Next Steps ministry. You can find a brochure in your seat to find out a little bit more about that, but really it's just finding what your gift is, making sure that you're never stagnant in your faith and growing. And one way I want to highlight you can take your next step even before that room opens is this nicely decorated Park Kids section. So they have a need for buddies, teachers, volunteers of all sorts, even tech team. Let me show you a little illustration. Okay, so today's lesson, we're going to be talking about manna that the Lord provided. And maybe this is definitely not even manna, it's just a loaf of bread. But years ago in 2008, when Brittany and I were engaged, we signed up for a Edmond Church of Christ Children's Bible lesson, and it was the very place we find ourselves today with manna. And for whatever reason, we chose colorful, fruity marshmallows that those children to this day, now adults, are probably a little confused what manna is. I'm sorry if I did not teach the truth. However, great memories, and I just want to tell you, not only will you have those memories, you will come in to bless those precious kids, but you will years later reflect like me and watch those young men and women grow up in their faith, and it is a joy. So please, right after, if you heard nothing else from my sermon today, the sermon is right there. That's your next step. Sign up, help the children's ministry. So, that is a good vibe. Those were like really kind things, I should say, I was saying to you. Now I'm going to start with something that stirs the pot. Every minister just wants to start by stirring the pot and making you angry, so let me start. OU Sooners and OSU Cowboys are terrible, and they will never win a national championship. Chick-fil-A is the worst fast food establishment ever created. Disney World is not fun, and puppies are not cute, and they're a terrible pet. All right, clearly, you know me. I don't feel that way about those things, but on this picture, you'll see a Looney Tune that many of you recognize as Yosemite Sam. He had a catchphrase that looked like this. Not the story. That was not his catchphrase. His catchphrase was, "Them's fighting words," right? Those of you that grew up watching Looney Tunes, you guys watched Space Jam too, and that was terrible. But Looney Tunes, Yosemite Sam said, "Them's fighting words," and today's lesson is going to be called Fighting Words, and I'll explain that in just a moment. So, I'm also going to have a concept of truth and lies. I'm going to be looking at truth versus lies multiple times. And for me to start with that, we need to start by playing two truths and a lie, right? Do you guys play this at your dinner table where you say three statements and one of them is not true? So I'm going to give you 2 rounds of it. Number 1, I've been bungee jumping. Number 2, I've been skydiving. And number 3, I've been to the Great Barrier Reef. What's the lie? Peyton? Okay, the lie is that I've not been bungee jumping. So if you just look at skydiving next to bungee jumping, I'm still afraid of heights. And I've jumped out of a plane 20,000 elevation feet in the air, but I didn't have time to be afraid of heights. When you're attached to a professional skydiver, when he jumps, I'm gone too. Whereas bungee jumping, they apparently tell you that you have to stand on a platform and plummet to your own death. You get to make that choice yourself. So I will never choose to die or almost die. So that one's the lie. How about another one? Okay, so the theme is costumes. Number 1, when Brittany, my wife, met me, I was wearing a Buzz Lightyear costume. Number 2, I took Brittany to a non-costume event during college and made her dress in costume in 70s disco Saturday Night Fever clothing. Number 3, in the month of December, I wear a Buddy the Elf costume at every single opportunity, even when I'm not asked to. So there is no lie in those. It was a trick question. I love costumes, if you don't know that about me. But normally, there's at least one statement that blends in just like a chameleon. And I want us to be thinking about truth and lies today. Back to the title, Fighting Words. So Brittany and I love the Christian musician named Ellie Holcomb. And she has a song named Fighting Words, and it's her and the enemy, or her and Satan, kind of having a dialogue. And here's what she says. Satan says to her, "Who are you to speak the truth? Look at all of your failures and mistakes. If they really knew you, there's no way they could love you anyway. The enemy keeps talking, telling me to hide my face in shame, whispering that everything I've done will drive the Father's love away. So I will fight the lies with the truth. I will keep my eyes fixed on you. I will sing the truth into the dark." And then she says, "I will use my fighting words." So what today's lesson is about, your fighting words are truth. And that is our weapon against lies. So if you have been following in the story, we're in chapter 6, and that chapter is called Wandering. It is based in Numbers and Deuteronomy, and the theme of that section is the Israelites are going to be believing a lie or multiple lies, but there is truth in front of them. So our first point today is, what are my lies? And if you can identify what your personal lies, the season of lies that you might be in right now, that you tend to believe, we need to start by identifying those and naming them. The book of Numbers is probably the most boring title to any book in the Bible. The reason it's called Numbers is the first 10 chapters or so, they're taking a census of the 12 tribes of Israel, and they're counting them out and dispersing them into each tribe. That's why it's called Numbers, but the word numbers in Hebrew translates to in the wilderness, and that would have been a much cooler title of the book. They could have went with that, but they didn't. But let's do a recap of where we have been in the story. So you guys know, at this point, they were all in bondage. The Israelites were in bondage in Egypt. They were in chains, right? And today, this is going to illustrate Egypt. They had all these, what they thought were blessings, but they were in bondage. So God heard their cry after 430 years of slavery and sent Moses and sent the plagues. You guys know the rest. They're rescued. They, through the plagues, then go to the Red Sea. God parts it. They're on the other side of it. They're safe. And now, last week, Mitch was talking about Mount Sinai. That's where Moses received the 10 Commandments on that mountain. I won't talk about what the Israelites did at the bottom of the mountain, but Moses was receiving truth. And the Israelites, in theory, were supposed to take these truths, and what it's really called is a covenant. You guys entered into a covenant with the Lord. And what that means is you are in a contract, but it's not a contract that God breaks. He is faithful to his own covenant, even when we are golden calf unfaithful. So God continues to not wipe them out after that golden calf, and he now says, I need you to go to the desert of Paran, or the wilderness. And you guys know at this point, it's to Canaan's land I'm on my way, where the soul of man never dies, right? Did we sing that already? Maybe Bryson will later. So that song is really just an illustration of where they were to go, but it was going to take 40 years to get there. Not because God set up a 40-year route, but because of the Israelites and the lies that they tended to believe. And just in case you didn't know, a lot of those Israelites never saw the promised land, just like Moses and Aaron, because they said, I don't want to go to the promised land. The lie that they initially believed in Numbers 13, God said, hey, I want you to go check out this land that I'm promising you, and you are going to it's flowing with milk and honey. It is good. My promises are good. And they said, you know what? It looks good, but these 10 out of the 12 spies came back and said, it's not good. I mean, the land is good, but God's plan for us is not good, because there are giants. They are going to consume us. We looked, and I promise God doesn't know what he's talking about, because if we take this land, Canaan, we're all dead. And, Joshua and Caleb were like, that's not true. And they wanted to stone Joshua and Caleb for upholding truth. They all believed the majority. And just think about that. As a church, if we tell one lie, if we complain with murmurs of God's promises are not true, how that can affect a whole church. And that's what happened. So Deuteronomy 8 verse 2 says, remember how the Lord your God led you through the wilderness for 40 years, and he did so to humble us and test what was in our heart. What is in your heart in your wilderness right now? Your wilderness is you are on earth, and all of us long to be Revelation 21. There's no more mourning, crying, suffering. There's a place with golden streets, and it's going to be beautiful. Canaan, milk, honey. But right now we're in between point A and point B. We're in the wilderness. And what are we going to choose to believe? The first question I really want you to ask yourself is, what lies have I taken into my heart as truth? What the Israelites heard from those 10 men, that was a lie. And they viewed it as truth. We will die if we go to Canaan. So let's look at a very big collection of verses. Follow with me on the screen, because I've taken from Numbers 11 all the way to 21 to show you all the lies they believed. Let's start. Now the people complained about their hardships in the hearing of the Lord, and when he heard them, his anger was aroused. The rabble with them began to crave other food, and again the Israelites started wailing and said, if only we had meat to eat. We remember the fish we ate in Egypt at no cost. We had cucumbers, melons, leeks, onions, and garlic, but now we've lost our appetite because all we see is this manna every day. They raised their voices and wept aloud. They grumbled against Moses and Aaron. And the whole assembly said, if only we had just died in Egypt or in this wilderness. Why is the Lord bringing us to this land that will fall by the sword and that our wives and children will be taken as plunder? Wouldn't it be better for us to just go back to Egypt? There's no water for the community. And they gathered in opposition to Moses and Aaron. They quarreled with Moses and said, if only we had died when our brothers fell before the Lord. Why did you bring the Lord's community into this wilderness that we and our livestock should die here? Why did you bring us out of Egypt to this terrible place? We had figs and grapevines and pomegranates, and now there's no water to drink. And so they traveled along this route to go around Edom, but the people grew impatient on the way. They spoke against God and Moses. Why have you brought us out of Egypt to die in this wilderness with no bread and water and miserable food? This is where we're at. And when we are in a season of lies, we tend to forget the good promises of milk and honey and deliverance that God is telling us about. And we start to internalize, God is not for me. God is against me. Why do I go through these trials? He must not love me, and he won't provide for me. So why would I trust him? And all of a sudden they are believing that this is not good. And so God is hearing them say, why didn't you just let me stay in Egypt? And he said, oh, you want to go back to Egypt? Yeah, it was really good there, Israelites. I love you guys, but let me speak truth to you. Did you love the oppression? Did you love the slavery and the chains and the beatings? Did you love the genocide? Did you love that some of you had to sacrifice your own children there? Are we having selective memory? You are focusing on the foods and the blessings in your mind, and you are forgetting the slavery that you were in. And so I heard a quote one time, and it said, it's one thing for God to get them out of Egypt. It's another thing and a bigger thing for God to get the Egypt out of them. Tim Keller says, you can take people out of slavery more easily than you can take slavery out of people. As the Israelites walked out of Egypt, they now carried a more severe bondage, and this time it was in their minds. See, God freed them of chains, but this time it's in their pattern of behavior and in their hearts. And they are free, but they are not taking on a free man and a free woman's frame of mind. So the Lord has work to do in them, and he has work to do in you and I. And it starts with him working on our Egypt. Our Egypt is the lies we tend to believe about God, about what he thinks about me, and what he allows to happen in my life. Jesus said there are two voices you can listen to every day. Look in John 8 with me. He says, if the Son, Jesus Christ, sets you free, you're free indeed. But why is my language not clear to you? He says, it's because you're unable to hear what I say. Your father, the devil, wants you to carry out his desires. But I need to tell you something. He was a murderer from the beginning, and there's no truth in him. All he does is speak his native language. He is the father of lies, and that's all he can speak. Whoever belongs to me hears what I say. Truth. My promises are good, and I'm for you, and I'm not against you. But the reason you don't hear is because you're in bondage. You're keeping the Egypt. Even though I freed you, you're staying there. So I'm going to show you a video clip. We don't have the rights to any video. I'll show you if you're watching online. But this clip will perfectly illustrate the two voices we're tempted to listen to. They end with, I hope they are nice to him, but I don't know if you could tell, there was just love. There was just truth that those parents were looking at little Augie, who obviously didn't look like the people around him, but they said, no, you're fearfully and wonderfully made. You're beautiful. You're exactly how we love you to be, and we wouldn't change a thing about you. And you can see he takes off the helmet, and he's speaking truth. You're loved, but at the same time, God allows us to walk from point A to point B, from the wilderness to Canaan, from earth to heaven. And he said, people will persecute you. People will hate you, and people will speak. The father of lies will speak to you. And so we're walking down the hallway. And just like Augie, no one in his hallways, besides a few people, spoke those truths that God did, that the parents did over him. Augie was told that he wasn't beautiful and that he wasn't perfect in the sight of his parents. And he had two voices to listen to, and you and I do too. Many of us in this room went to the men's retreat, and Chris Seidman absolutely killed it. I think many of us guys are still hearing the truths. Let me show you one thing that he taught the men at that retreat. He taught us that there are 5 core lies that tend to be the narrative of a Christian's life. I am what I have. I am what I do. I am what others think or say about me. I'm nothing less than my best accomplishment, and I'm nothing more than my worst failure. I don't know which one resonates with you. I have the same one Chris does right in the middle. What do people think or say about me? That is a core lie of my identity. I need to be like the parents with Augie, like this is all that matters, what he thinks of me. And Satan knows your exact vulnerability. He knows exactly how to make you fall in temptation. He knows how to make you feel that God is not for you and that he's against you. He knows your vulnerability, and he will use people to have the father of lies speak over your identity and tell you who you are and define you. But every lie we believe about ourselves and about God is ultimately rooted in what we believe about him. Until we throw off the lie that God's love is not for me, then our emotions, our decisions, our behaviors will be twisted up in the mistaken belief that we're worthless and unlovable and that not even God could forgive me this time. We should allow God to take so much space in our thinking that our fears would drown in comparison when we allow him to occupy this space. A.W. Tozer said, as God is exalted to the right place in our minds, our 1,000 problems are solved at once. There's hope for us to view ourselves in the way God views ourselves again. You guys remember, Paul used to be Saul. His identity was blasphemer, persecutor, murderer. And do you guys remember, before he became Paul, there was these scales on his eyes, and it said they fell from his eyes. And I believe that's when he first saw himself the way God sees him. Because Jesus said, you're not what they say about you. He says, you are my instrument for righteousness. You are my speaker of good news. And the scales fall from his eyes almost as if he saw himself for the first time. We have to go to war because right now there is an enemy. We have two voices, and it's not a little red devil pitchfork and an angel on our left and right. There is a real spiritual warfare we're in, and the war that Satan is going for is your mind. Because what you believe about yourself can keep you in bondage and can keep you here. But there is hope. Read 2 Corinthians 10 with me, verse 4 and 5. It says, Christians, I need to remind you, the weapons you fight with are not a weapon of this world. You can't take down Satan and his spiritual warfare with any weapon of this world. On the contrary, we have divine power to demolish strongholds. So what we do is we demolish arguments and any pretension and any lie that sets itself up against the knowledge and truth of what God says about you. And we take captive every one of those thoughts, every one of those lies, and we make it obedient to Jesus Christ. You and I have power within us, and it's called the Holy Spirit. You're a temple where God exists, so you don't have to be captive and in chains anymore when you have God living in you and when you have God speaking your identity to you. So my next point is, what is the truth about me? And I seek that. I want to show you God what he said to the Israelites. He could have just blotted them all out and said, if you don't see that I delivered you from slavery and I'm for you, then I'll wipe you out. And he doesn't. And here's what he says instead. He says, the Lord has promised good things to you, Israel. I'll come down and speak with you there, and I'll take some of the power of the Spirit that is on you, and I'll put it on them, Moses. You don't have to share the burden of the people alone. The Lord heard you, Israelites, when you wailed, yes, you want meat, and I'll give you meat. I need you to know it. I am slow to anger. I am abounding in love. I forgive sin and rebellion. Oh, yes, I have forgiven them. The Lord said to Moses, gather them together. I'll give them water, and I'll tell them not to be terrified or afraid. And I will tell them that the Lord is going before them and will fight for them, as I did for them in Egypt. Before your very eyes and in this wilderness, you saw how the Lord your God carried you as a father carries his child. In spite of this, when you didn't trust the Lord your God, who went ahead of you in fire by night and in cloud by day to search out places for you to camp and show you where you should go, in spite of that, I will bless you in the work of your hands. I'll watch over your journey in your wilderness. These 40 years, the Lord has been with you, and you've not lacked anything. Be careful that you don't forget me, what I've done for you when I brought you out of Egypt in slavery. I'll humble you, and I'll cause you to hunger and feed for manna, but not just manna, but on every word that I speak over my children. I speak their identity, and this is what will be their filling. They will not have to go to this place to fill the voids of their soul anymore, because I will carry them. And in me, they'll lack nothing. Do you know, it took them 40 years to get to Canaan? And I think the reason is sometimes it might take us an entire lifetime to fully see ourselves the way God sees us, and to finally hear his voice and let it be our rest. He is teaching you and me in this life of all the things you and I are chasing. you will find that it's all an empty well until you finally rest in on every word that comes from his mouth to be your sustenance in this life. We will learn our fighting words with truth. And I want to show you someone who did that for us and showed us how to do that. Watch this clip with me. In 3 simple words what your fighting words are every day, and it's the phrase, "It is written." It is written is anything that he says about you, and his truth will sustain you. I don't know if you guys noticed, but that was 40 days in the wilderness for Jesus. Do you see a parallel? Does that sound like any story we've been studying? Why did Jesus spend 40 days in the wilderness, and why did the Israelites spend 40 years? It was to show you and me how to not wander in the wilderness with chains. The Israelites wandered in the wilderness with chains, and Jesus worshiped in the wilderness. Because when you know your identity, you're not in bondage anymore. Did you guys notice that story's in Matthew chapter 4? Do you know the significance of the chapter of what happened right before he went into the wilderness? He went to his baptism. Chris Seidman talked about this. He went to his baptism, and the clouds part, and it says, "This is my son, and I am well pleased with him." So when you step into tomorrow at work and in your families and in your school, you can wander. Wandering is still in chains, but worshiping in the wilderness is stepping into every conversation and every moment, knowing who you are and whose you are and what God says about you. And when you know that, you are free from any interaction that tells you otherwise about yourself. And all of a sudden, that truth, people will notice something in you that they're like, what is up with Jesus? He seems super confident, but not arrogant. It's because he knows who he is. So here's my assignment for you this week. I have homework. Look at this picture right here. Fighting Words, she wrote this song, and Ellie also wrote a devotional book. You might not even need a devotional book. What you need is the truth. This is just her tool to help you. I'm going to take Through the Next Steps Facebook page. Go search that later, and I'm going to guide all of us through 7 days of fighting words and of truth. But I want you this week to write out the lies that you believe about yourself and believe about God. And I want you to go search for a scripture that says otherwise. If you don't view yourself as valuable, go find otherwise. If you think that God has let you be through a season of illness and family separation and trial, go find what God really speaks about that situation that you're enduring. I'm going to end with this. Why the wilderness? Mitch just quoted Hosea 2:14 a week ago. So Hosea 2:14 says, I'm going to allure her. This was Gomer, who was adulterous. Gomer is you and me, by the way. Gomer is the one not keeping up with the covenant when Hosea does. He says, I'm going to allure her, lead her into the wilderness. Anybody remember what it says? So I can speak tenderly to her. Your lives are busy, and the reason you can't hear truth is because we fill our lives with social media, with news, with our phones, with technology, with people. We fill every single moment with noise, and no wonder we are a disaster in our own identity and allowing the world to tell us the narrative of our own life. We are in slavery, and Egypt was busy. So he allured her into the wilderness. Does anybody remember in number 6, a song that Bryson's going to sing? This is what God does for his children in the desert. The Lord bless you and keep you. Make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord turns his face towards you and gives you peace. And do you know what it says in number 6 right after that song? I will give my name and put it on you. You've been walking around in your own bondage of identity, and he says that you can't do it on your own, so let me give you my identity. You are loved. You are my child, and I will carry you through the wilderness when you can't do it on your own. Will you start believing about yourself the way God sees you? That is the point of today. The Israelites believed this about themselves. But there's no distraction in the wilderness, and you don't have to wander anymore. You can worship in the wilderness, and the truth will set you free. I will fight the lies with the truth. I will keep my eyes fixed on you. I will sing the truth into the dark. I will use my fighting words. I am a child of God. I've been set free from the bondage of who Satan says I am and what the world says about me. I am loved, holy, blameless, and dearly loved by the Father. You are set free, children of Israel and children of the church. Your identity is now in him and what he says about you. So will you start your day with what he says about you and end your day every time you are lost and hopeless? So if you are stuck in the wilderness right now, you can come forward or on the sides or come to me down here on the side and let me pray for you. And if you have not declared that you are a child of God through baptism, that opportunity is here for you at this moment too. Let's stand and give praise to the voice of truth, Jesus Christ.